We stopped the first video at this point, and we were talking about 19 June 1913. So why 19 June 1913? So that's exact. That there was another act in that year that came into power, that which limited African land ownership to 7% of the total, and later to 13% through the 1906 Native Trust and Land Act of South Africa. Well, interesting to me was that the National Party came to power in 1948, and we blame lots and lots of things on them, but the British was in power in 1913 in the Union of South Africa, just after the Anglo-Boer War, and they started these very bad acts which affects us even today. So from that day, so they basically moving back on what was established on that day. Before 1913, anyone could own land in South Africa. So there are other Pareto criteria. I think it's important for you to notice this function. Person A's utility is a function of the consumption by person A, let's call that MA, plus the utility of person B is also affecting the utility of A. If it goes well with my neighbor, then I also have more utility. So the more utility my neighbor gets, the more I will have. But the neighbor's utility is a function of MB. It's the same thing as to say it's just another function G now, but my utility is a function of what I consume and what my neighbor consumes. The better it goes with my neighbor, the better it goes with me. The third line that they have in the textbook in equation 5.3 is nonsense. Because it says that 0 is greater than this, which is greater than that, which is greater than 0. How can 0 be greater than 0? That's total nonsense. And it's this greater than sign which is wrong. So it should read like this. The G prime means marginal utility. G prime of MB means my utility, I'm person A. My utility goes up if the neighbor can consume more. G prime of MB is positive. Greater than 0 is positive. So my marginal utility is positive if the neighbor can consume more. Then G prime of MA, now the story here is that I am giving the neighbor things. I'm giving the neighbor some of my goods. So G prime of MA is negative. I'm giving stuff away. If I give stuff away, then my utility decreases directly. But the absolute value of my decrease should just be smaller than the neighbor's gain. Then my utility can still go up if I give my neighbor something. So that's the story here. So the externality argument works exactly like that. Poverty has negative externalities. Crime is, for example, one of the negative externalities of poverty. So I'm willing to pay my taxes, and then the government can give transfers to all the poor people. That will reduce poverty and that will reduce crime, and I will benefit from it. So the government treats the externality with my tax money and I benefit from it, so that's a good argument for redistribution. The redistribution will reduce crime and will reduce the externality of crime. Therefore, there's also an insurance argument which you can read in the textbook. It says that I'm willing to pay taxes because the government will take care of me when I become unemployed or when I become sick, so I don't need to take up private insurance. You can decide whether you agree with that or not, and I think it also depends in which country you live, whether that will be true or not. So figure 5.2 says that let's say we could draw a utility possibility curve. This is a bit different from a production possibility curve. I think it would be possible to have a production possibility curve, see what you can produce, what quantities of two goods you can produce given a certain amount of capital labor. That's measurable. But to think that you and I can go and sit down and draw a curve of all the possible combinations of our utilities. Point Q, for example, is where person B has all the utility and A has nothing. Point R is where person A has everything and R has nothing, and then there are combinations of the two. One combination is G, where the utility of A is read off from the horizontal and the utility of B is read off from the vertical, as opposed to H, where A has more and B has less, but they go onto a higher welfare function. So the welfare functions also show combinations of utilities giving different levels of society welfare. Now, theoretically speaking, H is the optimal situation where, given what is possible in the red curve, the higher level of social welfare you can reach, the better. To be able to draw this graph at all, it must be possible for the community to choose between different points. We have to say, well, it's possible for the community to choose between the one green point and another green point. They lie on different welfare functions, but they are able to choose between the one and the other. Then if they can choose, then that means they are making value judgments about the two persons. Moving from the one green point to another, moving from the top left to the bottom right, means the society considers A more worthy than B, because they think it's okay to take stuff away from B and give it to A, and in this process move to higher welfare levels. So one thing that you must know, which is almost trivial, is what is cardinal utility and what is ordinal utility. Cardinal means you can compare and you can add them up, you can calculate the utility. So person A goes to the store, buys a trolley full of stuff. Person B goes to the store, buys a trolley full of stuff. We can measure the utility and even add it up. When will such a function be Pareto optimal? Well, if you increase the utility of A or you increase the utility of B or both, as long as you don't have, as long as you don't harm someone by giving someone else more, then it could be Pareto optimal. It could even, as we've just seen, be Pareto optimal if you give stuff away, as long as the marginal utility of income is negative. Is decreasing, sorry, not negative, decreasing. So that means the more income you have, the smaller the extra utility you get from getting another 10 Rand or another 100 Rand. And this is so, isn't it? A very poor person getting a 10 Rand at the robot is very happy. The utility that he gets from that 10 is very high. Well, if you give a person with driving a Lamborghini an extra 10 Rand, the increase in utility is almost nothing, if positive at all. It's very small. So the more income you have, the smaller the increase in utility if you have another 10 Rand. And if that is true, then you can take utility away from one person and give it to another and have an improvement in society welfare. Ordinal utility means we cannot measure it, but we can order it. We can write it in a certain order. We can say person A's utility is more than person B, but we don't know by how much it is more. We can say, well, it is definitely more utility for a poor person to have 100 Rand than for a rich person to get another 100 Rand. So it's general, and then we can derive the types of functions we had in the previous graph. Efficiency considerations is important. You need to read this paragraph and look at the examples that they have from the graph. So it's true, and we will see this later in the textbook, that most taxes and subsidies have distortional effects on markets. I don't know if you've noticed, but the sugar tax. Markets changed after the sugar tax. The firms started changing the sizes of the bottles. So if you now buy a bottle without sugar in it, you can get more liquid in it than if it contains sugar. So they've changed their behavior as a result of the tax. That means it's distortional. So let's say we have a utility possibility frontier, and we're at some competitive equilibrium, which is efficient. So everywhere on the possibility frontier is an efficient combination of the quantities of good X and Y. Let's say society wants to move to a higher level of welfare. They want to move to point S. So they have an election and everybody votes for position S. And the government is supposed to take us from C0 to S. If they do it, they want to redistribute goods. So let's say there are distortions and they aim at S, but they reach point F. Now I put the yellow dot next to the F so that you can still see the F. Then it's not so bad, is it? Because they want to achieve S, but they are a bit inefficient in the sense that there are distortions in their policies, and they only move to F. Then we will say this is okay because it's still on a higher level of welfare. So we can tolerate some inefficiencies from the government. But if they aim at S and they reach E, way inside the possibility frontier, then we would say no, it's not worth our while, because now we have moved to a lower level of society welfare than we were before the government intervened from point C0. There are also other examples in this paragraph which you should work through in this graph. This is an important graph and important concepts, because we're also going to talk about government failure in the next chapter.